Claire and welcome to Needle Say More. This week's tutorial, I want to invite you to make a tablecloth dress with me. So this is a really old Marks and Spencer's tablecloth. You can say it says St Michael's there. So it's 50% cotton, 50% polyester. But to be honest, it does feel quite nice and thick and cottony. So I'm going to make a toile of a dress that I've been meaning to make for a while. And it is quite a lot of fabric. So this was given to me by a colleague of my mother's that just had a load of fabric in her stash that she wasn't using. So rather than let it go to waste, I'm going to see if I can construct a nice summer dress out of it. Let's get started. Whenever you are cutting a project out from an existing piece of cloth, in this case a tablecloth, rather than a fresh piece of fabric you have bought, it's really important to make sure you're on the straight of grain. So to check that you're on the straight of grain, you can either use the weave of the fabric, look at the print on the pattern, or fold in your fabric to see how it lays. So don't iron it flat, hold the fabric up and check that it is lying flat and that it's all really happy. So I cut all my pattern pieces out for the Indigo Dress by Tilly and the Buttons. I added extra length into the bodice piece. You could probably see the washi tape on my patterns in the last clip where I added it in, and I had to piece together on the centre back seam of the skirt because I couldn't do both pieces on the fold. But again, when you're making clothing from existing fabric, you have to be quite clever in how you're going to piece it on to make sure you get the most out of the fabric. So the structure of this tablecloth was just crying out for a gathered sleeve. The structure of the fabric, because it's quite thick for a tablecloth, it did hold the gathers really well, which was fortunate because this dress had a lot of gathers. So I did a gathered sleeve, so there's gathering at the sleeve head. I did the skirt, which is gathering on, and then I added an extra ruffle on the bottom of the skirt, which was the full width of the tablecloth. So I had lots of gathering to do to get that into place. Then I took my time stitching the panels together and made sure that I tried to sew it from the side with the gathering on to reduce the amount of tucks that I may have. So you can see here I'm sewing from the gathering side and smoothing underneath with my hand to check that it's really smooth, checking underneath, making sure I'm not going to have any tucks. And there was a lot of gathering and a lot of fabric involved in this dress. And then after every panel that I stitched together, I would then open it out and check for any tucks before I removed the gather stitches or moved on to the next piece. I found it easier as well to take the arm off my machine so that I could get really, really close to the presser foot. So it's really important to check for any tucks after you've stitched together each panel before you move on to the next bit. So my favourite hack for sewing hems to get them as accurate as possible is I use my seam gauge, and I usually do a 2cm hem on dresses. So I measure using the seam gauge because it's a little notch rather than looking at each millimetre. I measure using the seam gauge and pin it in place. Then I take it over to the ironing board and press it and give it a really good press with lots of steam. And then I stitch it. If there are marks from where it's been pressed with the pins in, like little lines, then I give it another press after I've sewn it. But I generally find this way is much better because when you're trying to press it on the ironing board, it can get really hot and you can get burnt by the steam. And I find it isn't as accurate and they're not as straight. So the hems were on the bottom of the sleeve and all the way around the skirt. So it's a double width of the tablecloth, the bottom. So it was a really big hem. So here it is in all its glory finish, so I had to put in my slow fashion handmade good vibes label. So because the tablecloth is really structured, the sleeves have come out really well. It's got lovely pockets so I can hide things in it, and then it's got that big ruffle at the bottom. So I think from an unused, unloved tablecloth to a lovely summer dress, I'm really pleased with it.